For the months of August and September 2023, I selected Pathwork Lecture 190, which is an invitation. And the invitation is to experience all your feelings. And the second half of the title is Laziness as a dynamic rather than a static condition. Rather than talk about the lecture, because very often I feel that I've covered it in the study guides, rather than talk about the lecture, I thought I would talk about why I selected it, what it means to me, why I thought it was relevant at this particular time. And this is a long process for me. This goes back at least 10, 15 years, my interest in this phase, this aspect of the lectures, of feeling all your feelings. So the first thing that happened was that I was working with somebody and I found that I was somewhat flippant about the statement, feel your feelings. It's a place where you say something and then you just have a feeling that you've underplayed it. You've made it sound a little easier than it is. And so I examined that. I remembered I felt a glitch about that something wasn't right. So I thought about it, and then I went back to the lectures and looked up some titles and found this. And in reading this lecture, Pathwork Lecture 190, I realized that I had very, very much underestimated how hard it is to experience all your feelings. It may be easier after a while. I have a capacity to remember how dumb I was 35 odd years ago when I first started this work. It's been very helpful for me to remember how ignorant, how frightened, how repressed, how clueless I was about so many things. And feeling feelings was one of them. So it's rather nice that I got glib about it. It means I've advanced a bit. But when you're trying to help somebody else, it's important to have the empathy. It's important to remember, not so easy when you're first starting. Not so easy when you've been repressing things out of fear for a long time to just feel your feelings. So that was the impetus for getting started on this. And then when I started to read the lecture and I realized how big it was, I expanded it to 2 months, which is good in the summer. And then I began to realize that this was an opportunity that I personally enjoy a great deal. I like bringing in other aspects of life to the Pathwork lectures. I like adding news articles and science and studies and what we've found out, what psychologists are studying, what the scientists are studying, what Voyager is doing, what astrophysics is doing. We're in motion in terms of knowledge right now, both spiritual knowledge, emotional, scientific, a lot of things are in motion. And it's enjoyable to me to try to bring these things together and demonstrate the universality of a so-called spiritual concept. It's not a spiritual concept, it's a life concept, it's a piece of truth. And it helps in many, many areas. So I cast back to a book that I had read by Daniel Goleman, who had written Emotional Intelligence a while back. And he was part of a 2-week seminar that the Dalai Lama holds every couple of years. And he was the scribe. Now, they've had these things before, but I guess they'd never had such a good scribe. He did a really good job of writing up what this meeting was about, all these thinkers and philosophers and scientists and everybody sitting around having all these discussions. And the book was inexpensive, which I appreciated. They basically offered it at cost. That's how I interpreted the low cost of it. And as I read it, what I found was that every chapter opened so many ideas that I would go off and research those ideas. And the book took forever. I never finished the book. I spent a year on that book, but I didn't actually finish the book itself. I would go off and read 5 other books because of this chapter and 5 others because of that. And one of the sections that I most remember that seemed most relevant to pathwork was contributions by one of the participants, Paul Ekman. Now, he delighted me because he was very practical. I liked the pathwork because it's practical. I liked Paul Ekman because he's practical. And Paul Ekman, like many creative thinkers, had a wild idea and then tried to figure out how he was going to find out the truth of that. How can you prove it? How can you get facts and figures? And so his idea was that there are universal emotions, and that those true emotions, real feelings, involve involuntary muscles that you can't fake easily. You can fake them, but it's hard to do. So that some people are intuitively able to tell when you're lying, because they intuitively know what your face should look like, and it doesn't look like that. They're not scientists, they're just intuitive. That was his idea, that the basic emotions involved facial muscles that would move automatically. So, and we all know the joke about when you smile and you're not really smiling. For instance, your eyes don't smile, your mouth smiles, but your eyes don't smile. And it's jarring, and people can tell something's not quite right. What he did was he decided he would be his own guinea pig, and he put electrodes in his face so that he would take, it's like, probably looked like a porcupine, had all kinds of electrodes in his face, so that when he activated a muscle, it would activate a device, so that he could learn which muscles activated, and he would know that he was feeling as best he could that feeling, so that he was fairly certain that he had felt happiness or joy, and these muscles had lit up the monitoring devices. Anyway, it just fascinated me. And then there was more work with that, MRIs about the brain. It was a absolutely fascinating book. The book is called Destructive Emotions by Daniel Goleman. So that led me into this study of Ekman and all his work. And I was fascinated by the idea that there are 5 or 6 basic emotions, and that then there are more complex layers and more complex layers. So as I was working on Pathwork Lecture 190, I did the research, because the internet is a wonderful place. And I did the research, and I found diagrams from various sources that would lay out how complicated words are when they're describing blends of feelings. And this is how we get lost. We forget the basic feelings, and we're off in 3rd and 4th layers of feelings, and we negate the origin of that. So for instance, I can't think of a specific example right now, but the 5 emotions are very basic. It's sadness, anger, surprise, disgust, interestingly enough, joy. And if you look at the basic emotions, and you find the basic emotions even under the fancy names and the layers and the complexities, it's easier to figure out what's going on. I may not be explaining this well, but that's where I went. And when I saw this, I thought this was an opportunity to offer people the opportunity to see this kind of research. And I looked for diagrams that were easy to read. And so I incorporate those into my newsletters and into the study guides, and attempt to give people places to go that might be of interest to them, to add to the spiritual concepts in the lectures. So this is part of the fun I have in creating the study guides. And so these 2 things. One is that I found myself being facile when I would say the phrase, feel your feelings. And secondly, I integrated a long simmering interest in basic emotions into this work. When I do that, I find that I have enthusiasm for it. I have fun with it. It kind of dances. It has lots of bits and pieces. And it's not as boring. So a subject is always fascinating if you're interested in it, but if you're not as interested, you might need a little help finding the fun of it. So that's what I did with Pathwork Lecture 190. So I've done the little video to interest you. My interest is for you to go read the lecture or the study guide, or attend a meeting, or talk about it, or think about it, or explore on your own. So I hope you're inspired to do that. And thanks for listening.